Hi guys, today we're doing payment management and how you can get all that safe. Now that we're using this as the guidebook, so this is your like your professional development plan, your quality improvement plan, whatever language you want to use, this section will go through fees payments with you. Now, based on this, this book is based on the education and care legislation in Australia, so fees management. Now, when you're registering with a service, so you're an educator, you work from home, you provide care for children, you're registering with a service. It really is up to the service to set the fees, but they've got a guide to work through. So let's just say you might want to charge $1.50 an hour. Or you might want to charge $4 an hour. So they've got scope within their fee setting structure to meet your needs. So I've done a video on fee setting also. So I want you to double check for that if you're looking at what types of fees to add and late fees, if you've got part-time fees, or if you've got short notice fees, like say a family rings you at 8 o'clock in the morning, can you take them by 9, whatever that is. You might load that fee for the short notice because you've got to change your day around. That's all good, that's fine. Okay, now with fees management, you're a family daycare educator and you run your own home business. So you've got to make sure that money all meets your expenses and all those sorts of things. So the first thing you've got to determine is, firstly, how many children can you have? So that's the capacity of what you can do. And if you can have up to 7, you can have up to 7 under the regulations. But let's just say you've got a really small home, you might have no backyard. So you might say, you know what, I'm only going to provide care for 2 children and I'm going to do all day and they're going to be under 5. So you've got to work out the costings for that and what that looks like for you. So would you get out of that day, would you get like $180 per child per day? Is that what it is? And if you are getting $180 per day, what does that include? So that's all the stuff that we go through in the fee setting video. So this is just about fees management. So with educators in family daycare in Australia, you'll be using a range of systems to account for children's attendances and those sorts of things. So there's a few different approved software systems that can be used to process children's enrolments, children's attendances, if they went home early, their absences, if they qualify for any additional childcare subsidy. So you'll have software systems that do that. So I always say, like if you're starting out and want to know what the expectation is, I always say if you can use a smartphone, then you're able to use the system without paperwork. I just lost my page. Without paperwork and all that sort of stuff, because not many people record things manually these days. It's all done on a software system. So, the systems are pretty easy. As I said, if you can use a smartphone, then, you're pretty right. So don't worry too much about the systems. All right. So your responsibility is to record information. So you would record children's attendances. You would double check with parents regularly whether their information is up to date, whether their care needs are being met, all that sort of stuff. You've also got to keep copy of all of that documentation. So you've got to keep a hard copy. We've got to have a copy available of the child's enrolment form, what their predicted days are, or what their fees, what their attendance days are, and that all sets part of the parent agreement with Centrelink. And Centrelink get their percentage subsidised based on their income, based on their personal circumstances. Then, realistically, you don't need to worry about that. Any questions around childcare subsidy, make sure you send them on or you refer the family on to the nominated supervisor or the person in your service that is responsible for that. There might be an accounts person in the service that you're registered with. That would be the person that the parent needs to speak to if they're changing their care arrangement or their written agreement or anything like that to do with Centrelink childcare subsidy, that sort of stuff. Okay, so your responsibility, as I said, is to account for everything. So you've got to make sure that your attendances are all right, signed in properly, signed out properly, all that sort of stuff. Now, you've also got to make sure that any information that you have on parents' financial information, that you keep that confidential. Obviously, you keep that confidential. So you've got to have systems in your home so that if there are any discussions around payment of fees or those sorts of things, that it can be done confidentially. Now, I know that there are a lot of educators that still accept money from families. In Australia, we kind of really don't want that. The Commonwealth Department, who has the service agreement with the approved education and care service, it's the service's responsibility to make sure that fees are collected and that gap fees by the parents are paid. So have a look at what you're doing, what's going on. Does that really meet the current standard of today? And if so, it's not to say you cannot do it, but are the measures in place? So let's just say I'm your parent, I owe $20 gap fee. How is that handled for your sake? What if I pay you $20 today as a parent, and then 2 weeks time I go, oh no, I paid you $50, not $20. How are those kind of discrepancies handled with you being the educator? Because ultimately it's not your responsibility. As a contracted educator, you should be putting in many of you refer it to your timesheet, but you should be putting in an invoice to the service because you are contracted with that service. You put in an invoice to the service at the end of the fortnight, the month, or whatever your agreement with the service is, and that is then they pay you directly. So I always advise to services that parents be 2 weeks in advance with payments, and educators are 2 weeks in arrears. That's what I generally advise to services when they're doing it. Okay. So your responsibility is to make sure you've got any records at all that you need to maintain, maintained securely. So that means that other parents walking in just can't see a note on the table about fees or those sorts of things. So you've got to make sure that happens. You've also got to make sure that families will often approach educators, particularly once they become friendly, and say, oh, look, we don't need to put this in. You just babysit a little bit longer, or you do this. So families will often put educators in a position where sometimes the educator feels like, oh, I'm doing them a favour, I'm just helping them out, those sorts of things. If a family wants anything outside of their care arrangements, you need to report that to the nominated supervisor so that can be recorded. If you don't, what can happen is the federal government will audit the service, and if there are any discrepancies around the application of childcare subsidy, or if it even appears that it's not being administered properly, then what will happen is the federal government will do a review, a compliance desktop audit on the service, and that can have a real impact on the service's viability. That can lead to really big trouble. That can lead to services closing down. So we don't want any discrepancies to go through educators. Everything goes through the nominated supervisor, the service. So that's about fees payments. Okay, so if your service does let you accept fees from parents, how is that handled? Is that safe? If there is a discrepancy down the track, like I said before, hey, I paid you $50. No, you didn't. You only paid me $20. So how are those discrepancies handled? How are payments finalised? Who's accountable for what? So make sure if you are managing any money that you take all of those precautions that it is recorded, that the approved provider knows what you're doing, you know what you're doing, all that sort of stuff. So you've got to be really safe in this. This is really serious business when it comes down to the childcare subsidy and that sort of stuff, okay? Now, so that's your risk management. So have a look at, say, think about risk management. Parent paid me 20 and 50, that sort of stuff. Or you could also think to yourself, what if a parent were to leave tomorrow? What would happen to your income? And could you afford a family to leave tomorrow? So think that through. What would you do? So my response to that would be, you would always want a waiting list, so that if a family did give you 2 weeks notice, they're required, most cases, to anywhere between 2 to 4 weeks notice, depending on the policy. They give you their 2 weeks notice, that you can attract a family in that time so that you don't lose any income. Because as a small business owner, that payment management is vital to your business. So let's get into your payments. So I recommend that all educators have a budget. So what are you bringing in every week? So what's coming in, So that's your X dollars there, whatever that is coming in, and then what is going out. So you've got to cost all this out. Now the little stuff's kind of easy, and you can, that you can kind of sort out what you're having. So let's just say you're buying nappies. Let's just say you're providing food. You set a daily cost, like whether that be $2.30 per day or whatever that is. Now, a lot of people don't realise their car, their rent or their mortgage, those sorts of things. So you've got to proportion out. If your car is $1,000 to run, how much of that is attributed to you running your family daycare business? So you might say, okay, out of 24 hours a day, I use the car for family daycare for 3 hours. So therefore, over the course of the week, I use the car for 14 hours, whatever it is. So then you would have cost you $1,000 a month for 24. You would do that calculation, what that cost is per hour, and you would attribute 14 hours of that to your business. Yeah. So that's the cost of your business. So you've got to do all that. This you've got to account for so that when you get your budget in, say you earn $1,000 a week, that you know that $1,000 a week is not profit from a business perspective. It's not profit. That's your turnover. So that's what you're turning over. Then you take away all of your expenses, and that leaves you with your profit. Yes? Okay. Now, also in your budget, make sure that you account for any training. You need to have annual CPR, you need to have annual child protection, although you can access free child protection training. But your CPR, when you're working with children card comes up, or you're working with children screening comes up every 3 years, you need to account for that in your budget also. You need to have your insurances accounted for. And then once you work out all of your expenses and what you'll be providing, then you can work out this part here, how much you can earn and what your profit is, and then you will know the value of your business, what you're bringing in and what you can earn, and all those sorts of things. So cover all your costs, make sure that those costs are covered, how much you can charge, what are you offering so that you can charge that amount, and then deduct all of that off. So your payments you should have in your budget, you should have payments coming out monthly. So I would try and attribute as much of this over a month as I could. So you might pay your electricity bill per month, and then you're not left with a really big bill. That could be your financial management. You could do it that way. Make sure you can either do a separate account if you like, so that let's just say you work out your costs and you need to put aside for training and insurances, you need to put aside $5 per week in order for that, when it comes due, that you've already got that money set aside, and put a portion away for any kind of taxes or anything like that you need. Oh, and don't forget superannuation. A lot of educators don't pay their own superannuation. So build that 12%. So build that 12% into your costs and put all of that aside so that you've got the cash flow to manage your small home business and not get caught out. And then whatever your this and this. So let's say you make $1,000, your expenses equate to $50 a week, let's say. So in a separate account, you put away $50. Yeah, does that make sense? And then this should cover your wage, at least a wage. So diploma qualified, you're looking at about $23, $25, $27 an hour you'd be looking for to cover just your wage, and then all of that would be covered. All right? Okay, so hopefully that all makes sense. Again, if you've got any questions or anything like that, I've put all links here that you can get in touch. You can book yourself into my calendar really easy. I always give links to a free half-hour session, so you can always access your free half-hour session as we go, and there's other links in here that you might find useful. Don't forget to grab yourself a copy of this. This will get you through all aspects of operating a family daycare business from home in accordance with the Education and Care Services national law and national regulations. And it's easier than it sounds, trust me. All right, so hopefully this will help you. And again, if not, get in touch, but otherwise I'll see you soon. See ya, bye.